Hi, everyone, and welcome to week 2 of ENC 96. Today I want to spend our time discussing what a personal essay is and what makes a good personal essay. Before we get started, or before you watch this video, you should have already read the assignment sheet for major paper 1 that's found in today's folder. I'm going to share my screen. And this PowerPoint I will also put in today's folder as well. Just in case you want to refer to it, but there's not a whole lot to the PowerPoint. Personal essays, it's a pretty big topic, but I'm going to give you a basic overview, especially how it pertains to the work you'll be doing for major paper 1. Okay, so personal essay, you've probably seen before, you've probably written them, it's probably been called a personal narrative. But it's a subgenre of writing that falls under this umbrella of creative nonfiction. Creative nonfiction is nonfiction so it's true, and it's told in a way that's supposed to be entertaining to the audience. There are a lot of different types of creative nonfiction. Some of them, probably the most popular right now, is true crime. There's also like Hollywood biographies and autobiographies and things like that. And usually those are much longer. They are the length of a book, if not more. But for what we're talking about, a personal essay, those are pretty short. They are anywhere from flash nonfiction, so that's under 750 words, to slightly less than a book length. But regardless of how long it is, it's a short, true essay, so it's not made up, about a specific time, memory, or event that happened and its impact on the writer. It's not a full life retelling. We're all very complicated beings, and we can't say all that there is about us in one essay. And if we can, then we're going to skip over a whole lot of things that wind up being much more important. Instead, this type of writing seeks to boil down an event or a moment, or for you all, a significant moment that has a lot of importance, and it dissects that moment and explains it. So it doesn't just describe it, but it also reflects. It says, this is why this is important. It's not something like, my name is, I was born here, I grew up here. Instead, it's a significant time or event that you experienced, and you're explaining why it's important. The emphasis here is on creative. There's a poem by Emily Dickinson that has the line, "Tell the truth, but tell it slant." This doesn't mean that you're making things up. Instead, it's this idea that it's impossible to remember specifics, and everyone who experiences an event will remember it differently. There are some scientific studies in neurology that now believe that every time we remember something, once we remember it 3 different times, we start to remember our memory of the thing and not the event itself. So you will remember it differently. The importance is you don't want to make it up, but you do want to tell your truth, and you want to tell it in such a way that it's engaging to a reader. You can use things like conjecture. So saying phrases like, I wonder, or I don't know. So I wonder if he was as excited to meet me as I was to meet him. I imagine that she was just as nervous as I am. Those kinds of things that lets your audience know, I'm not really sure about this, but it could be. So let's talk about some overall tips and tricks. The first is you want to use fiction and storytelling techniques. Imagine when you're telling someone a story about this event, once you select your event or your moment, and you're telling someone about it, you usually tell it in such a way that they can really experience it with you. You know, you give them details, you say what happened before and what happened after, and then imagine that someone's asking you, well, so what? Or why does it matter? That's part of it too. You want to think about things like character. You're a character in this. What aspects of your identity are important for telling it? So for example, I've written a few pieces about that were inspired by the television series Supernatural. And one of them was about overcoming domestic abuse and then seeing a storyline in season 13 that reflected that experience back at me. And that moment, in that essay, it wasn't important for me to write about who I am as an instructor or any of those things. What was important is I was a female, I was a victim of domestic violence, I was someone who had healed from domestic violence, and I was a fan of the show. And those were the things I focused on. You want to think about scene, build it up, bring in dialogue, description of what's going on. When you read a book or an essay, you'll notice that you're reading a whole lot, you're reading it as a collection of scenes. Or think about when you watch TV. Sometimes there's a narrator that explains things in between, but overall, the focus of the story is a scene or these collection of scenes. Describe the place and the setting so that your readers understand where you are. And you're telling the story as if you're the main character of a story, which you are in this case. If you were writing it as a book, how would you explain it? It's important to think of this idea of truth, capital T, versus truth, lowercase t. They're the same word, but in this instance, they mean very different things. The first truth with a capital letter is objective truth. These are the facts, and that's what happened. But we don't experience life objectively. I'm sure we've all had in a situation where we've talked about something that happened with someone else who was there, and they're like, well, I don't remember it that way. That's okay. You're telling your truth. As long as it's how you remember it and what it feels like to you, then it's okay. For example, I've tried to write a few times about my grandfather's funeral. And in my memory, it was cloudy and rainy and just ugly weather. But everyone else that was there was like, no, it was actually a really nice day. And when I looked it up, and I double checked myself, it was sunny. But still in my memory, I remember it raining and it felt like the whole world was crying with me. So when I write about it, I will say, even though the weather report says it was sunny, in my memories, it was raining. Because that's how I remember it. It's important to combine the personal with the universal. That means that it's a personal story to you, but you want it to be understood by a reader, by an audience. This isn't venting or just getting stuff on the page, although that works very well for a pre-writing or a first draft. Instead, it's how can I make it appealing to someone who maybe didn't experience this with me? How can I connect it to the larger world? A lot is that they're being specific and having a lot of description, so that even though someone may not have experienced the same things, they can understand your experience and therefore experience it along with you. This is also called the so what aspect in a lot of writing. What does this mean outside of me? A big one, and my favorite part of creative nonfiction, especially personal essays, is the idea of finding and using your voice. This isn't just the idea that we all have a voice, although we do. It's also this idea that with this type of writing, it's not an academic piece, even though you're writing it for an academic class. This is a personal piece. It's not proper. And a lot of times, how we reveal who we are as a character or as a person is how do we speak? In this situation, you want to write how you speak. And then you want to revise or edit it to make sure it can be understood. If you use slang, it may filter its way into your writing. Dialect. I use words like y'all and ain't all the time. So in my writing, those words find themselves there too, because that's how I experience the world and that's how I explain things. If your first language isn't English and you're writing about things that you experienced with other people who spoke another language with you, then that will probably filter its way in. And that's okay. Like I had a student once who wrote about lullabies that his mother sang to him when he was growing up in Mexico. And he didn't translate those lullabies because he doesn't remember those lullabies in English. And it's not important at that time. It wasn't important for the audience to know exactly what the words were, although he did translate a couple of them. What was important is that they understood that his mom was singing these things and that she loved him. And if you use profanity, it may find its way in your writing too. You don't want to use profanity just so it will shock people. Instead, you use profanity in writing if that's how you experience the moment. Also, you want to consider tone. How do you want it to feel? What emotions do you want to evoke in your reader? And how do you emotionally process it? Are you sarcastic? Is it funny? Are you angry or bitter or sad about what happened? Then that's the tone you want to try to achieve in your writing through the language you use. And we'll talk about that more later. The most important thing here is that specifics are your friend. Description, concrete details, what sounds, what smells, what sights, what things did you touch? All of those things, all of those sensory details lend itself to a more specific description, a more concrete description. You want to think of it as something you can hold. And how did you feel about it? Even if a reader has never experienced the exact same thing you're writing about, details and description can help them experience it along with you. So you could say a fact like, I went to this concert. But depending on how you feel about the concert, you're going to remember different sensory details. If it's a concert you don't like, or if it's a musician that just wasn't good live, you may remember being uncomfortable. Your back hurts, your feet hurt, people spilled beer everywhere. It's crowded and hot. However, if it's a band that you love and they're playing in such a way that you found yourself caught in the moment, you're paying attention to that singer, you're experiencing things along with this crowd, and it feels like this united time, like you're all one. And you're not thinking about your feet hurting or your back hurting or how crowded it is, or if you're hot, or if you're tired, or if your throat hurts from screaming out the lyrics. You notice those things after the concert ends. And just by using those details, the reader will understand how you felt about a concert. If you're talking about a person, you want to describe that person in a way that your readers will experience that person with you. You want to reveal their flaws. Even if it's someone who has passed on and we want to think, oh, we shouldn't speak ill of the dead. This isn't speaking ill of the dead. It's saying, who was this person? And the same thing goes for you. Talk about yourself as a real person. Don't consider yourself as perfect or as completely flawed. And that's all that I have today for this quick overview of creative nonfiction. We will look at some of this more in detail later in the next few weeks or a couple weeks as we work on this paper. But I wanted us to just start out with a quick overview. If you have any questions, please let me know, and I would love to talk to you more. Have a good day.